All right, I'm here. Hello, 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 hello. Oh, I've forgotten how to talk again. Um, all right. Yeah, I just started recording and I wasn't ready. Um, okay, this is a follow up to the previous video that I put on this channel. I'm working on yeah, what I was talking about before, which was uh, the new version of the Blink plugin system. So I've just been working on that non-stop pretty much. And no, that's not true. I had one day off because I was stung by an insect and couldn't sleep because it was so painful. But it's better now. Seems to be yeah, just it's not as red as it was before by the looks of things. Yeah, I don't know if it was like a spider or anyway. Probably a mosquito. Right. So it's going pretty well, I think. I'm pretty pleased with what I've done so far. I can't really show anything working, but I can show, I guess. Okay, so there's two things that I've been working on. There's, again, I mentioned, I touched on this in the previous video, but um, actually, it's all public, actually. It's all in this branch called V2. So this is like a non-functional in development new version of the plugin API. Um, so previously, I guess I'll just start talking randomly about the various things I've done. So previously, in the old version, actually, let's open this up again. In the old version of the API, there was like three different headers depending on what kind of plugin you're implementing. I got rid of that and I just dumped. Now everything's just in one header. It's just blink.h. Um, so there's like these are the functions that you implement as the plugin developer, and um, then this is the functions for if you're implementing an effect. This is for if you're implementing a synth, and this is all sampler stuff. So the sampler is the most complicated kind of plugin, and this stuff you is like you you implement this interface regardless of what type of plugin. So you always implement this, and then either this or this or this, and you don't even need to report to the host actually what type of plugin it is, because the host will just when it's like loading the DLL, it will just see which functions are available to deduce the type of the plugin. Um, one sec, I need to just muting the microphone there so I could clear my throat. Right. A lot of this is similar to how things were before, but now I have this big chunk of shit here, which is basically this is not done yet. It's actually, is it done? I think this is done actually. This is everything that I need, but basically because of I'm not going to repeat what I said in the previous video, but the way that parameters are reported to the host is different now. So the host is going to call in this structure of callbacks, which provides an interface to the plugin for registering different types of parameters. And the reason this is so massive, maybe bigger than you're expecting, is because parameters in Blink are very finely detailed things. You can customize a lot about them and be very specific about exactly how each parameter should work. So the interface is maybe bigger than you expect for just declaring what kinds of parameters. It's not just like, I mean, I'm not that familiar with like VST and VST version 2 or whatever, but it's not just like, I have an int parameter or a float parameter, and it's all just values from 0 to 127 or whatever it is. Um, in Blink there, it's parameters are a more structured and more detailed thing. Uh, oh yeah, and all this stuff is part of the interface for defining parameters. So the plugin side of things, so there's two parts of, so that's the C interface. I'm in the wrong branch again. Why does GitHub do that? Then this is old stuff, which is eventually going to be deleted because I'm slowly migrating all this old stuff into this new lib directory, which is, I'm getting rid of all the old crap that doesn't make any sense anymore. A lot of the stuff is just, I'm just like dragging and dropping stuff into here, but some of it has to be refactored completely. So eventually this directory is going to disappear. So there'll just be the include directory, which is the C API, the C header. And then this lib directory is the C++, the C++ companion library that is, you can use it. The point of it is just to streamline plugin development. But there's no need to use this library if you don't want to. Previously, this was just for plugin development, but I now also have things related to host development as well. So this directory contains it's basically a bunch of helpful code for implementing either a Blink host or a Blink plugin. There's no, if you don't want to use it, you don't have to, but it's there if you want to use it, and all of the standard plugins, the blockhead plugins, are going to be implemented using this library. So the idea is there's a bunch of files in here. If you're implementing a plugin, you should be able to just pretty much include this header, this plugin import header, and it will put in all of the things that you are most likely going to need for implementing a plugin. And then I also have this host import, which is very work in progress at the moment, for if you're implementing a host. So at the moment, there's only one host in existence, and it's Blockhead. But I quite like the idea of having. So basically, I've pulled a lot of what was like part of the Blockhead code base. I pulled it out and put it into here, so that theoretically, like if I wanted to create like a test host or something like that, just for testing plugins, something like that, I could reuse a lot of code. Or if somebody else wants to do that, because this is all open source. Right, so there's two parts of this C++ library. There's the stuff for implementing plugins and stuff for implementing hosts. And the stuff for implementing plugins is pretty much done. I can't test it right now, but as a test, I've implemented two of the plugins. Like I've refactored two of the plugins to the new Blink library, and so these plugins are in. Again, this is a public repository. This has always been public. All of the Blockhead plugins are in this repository here. Very, very, very early on, the plugins used to be called generators. So this is like a legacy name. The word generators, I don't think appears anywhere else, just in this title here. So the way that these plugins used to be implemented, they were actually sort of way more complicated than they needed to be, and there's a lot of source files. You have all these source files, and then for every plugin basically looks like this. You have all these source files, and then you have this parameters directory and all of these like separate source files for the individual parameters. And now things are a lot neater. So this same plugin there, this is the classic sampler. Now this is all it looks like. It's basically 4 source files. Plugin.cpp, which basically implements that C interface that we were looking at. And this is a really concise interface that I now have for declaring, for like registering the parameters with the host. So this is absolutely everything that was previously like I needed all these source files to do it, and this parameter cpp parameters.h. This is all just happening once in this little function here, because in the case of this this classic sampler parameter, most of the parameters are just the default version of that parameter. So the way that, I'm repeating myself from the previous video, but the way that the Blink parameters work is you can register these standard parameters, but then you can override absolutely everything about the parameters. You can change completely. You can use the same ID so that the parameter will be grouped together and work with a manipulator system within Blockhead. But you can override pretty much everything other than the ID. You can override and change. So now, because of the way I've refactored things, as an example, this amplitude envelope parameter, I'm saying just give me the default version of this standard amplitude envelope parameter, but I'm going to override one thing about it. I'm going to set this flag on the parameter saying default active, and what that is I will show you. This is just an example, obviously, but if I create a sampler, a classic sampler plugin, you notice there's 5 parameters in total, but when I first create this block with this plugin attached to it, 2 of these parameters are already activated, so I don't need to go in here and activate them manually, and that's because they have that flag set. Amp and pitch both have that flag set, and everything else is default for this plugin for these amp and pitch parameters. All I'm doing is setting that flag. So this is how it's so much simpler than it was before to write these plugins. And there's some other stuff here. It's like so what's happening here? Noise amount. The noise amount envelope has a subparameter, which is the noise mode option parameter. So the way that manifests itself in like when it eventually gets to the host is if I enable this noise amount envelope. When I click on this envelope to open it, this noise mode option parameter will be added to the footer down here. So this is actually registered. This is another parameter that is declared by the plugin. It's an option parameter, so it doesn't get an envelope editor associated with it or anything. It's just this thing that you can click on to toggle it between two modes. And again, that's just a standard parameter. That's this one, noise mode. So I'm saying give me the default noise mode option parameter, and I'm going to set it as a subparameter of this noise amount envelope, which just means that it will appear in the footer anytime the noise amount envelope is open. Okay, so that's same thing for some of the other parameters as well. Okay, so this is an example of a plugin where most of the parameters are just defaulted, and I'm only overriding a little bit, and there's no custom parameters in here. They're all the standard parameters. But another plugin that I have already refactored to the new system would be the test synth, which actually has a mixture of things. It has some, again, these standard parameters where it's almost just defaulted, but then I have these custom parameters which have these custom UIDs here. So I'm manually creating an envelope here instead of just relying on a default standard Blockhead parameter. I'm creating an envelope parameter from scratch, and it's the carrier FM envelope parameter. And this is how it looks. It's so much simpler than what things were before. I just say what, again, I'll try to just show how it looks at the end of the day. The FM parameter would be this one here, FM amount. So it's being added to this carrier group. So this carrier contains these 3 parameters. So I've created this little group control here once it gets to the host. Carrier FM amount is the full name. I think if I hover over this. Oh no, I disabled these tooltips very recently actually. So FM amount is if the parameter is appearing in the context of a group, then it will use this short name parameter. So that's what's appearing here. The flags, default active, can manipulate means you can add a manipulator for it. Host clamp is technical details. I won't go into that. And then I'm generating this backing envelope for the envelope parameter. So an envelope parameter, the way things work is an envelope parameter is not in itself an envelope. An envelope parameter is a parameter backed by an envelope. So I have to manually create an envelope and then attach it to this envelope parameter. So I'll do that by calling env-index. So I'm saying, write this information about this parameter. The type of the parameter is an envelope. And the piece of information that I'm writing is for this envelope parameter is the envelope index, which is being returned from this function. And this percentage function is a convenience function which exists in this library for is Visual Studio not going to take me there? Oh, here we go. So this is like a convenience function because there's a bunch of parameters that I have across the plugins that I have at the moment where the parameter is basically represented as a percentage. So I have this convenience. There's going to be more that I add to this file, I think, as I refactor more of the plugins. There's going to be some other like common parameter types, or types is common parameter settings that I'm going to want to add to this file. But at the moment I just have percentage and percentage bipolar, which is like minus 100% to 100%. A percentage is 0 to 100, or depending on these type parameters, I guess. So I'm calling this convenience function to create this like backing envelope and then passing that to this function to associate it with this envelope parameter. And then I'd have more technical stuff, which I won't go into. But anyway, that's just an example of, like I said, these parameters are very detailed. There's a lot of customization points. And this is just, this is not the entire, this is not representative of all of the possible customization points. Again, some of the stuff is just defaulted because when you call this blink add param env function, it's basically creating an envelope parameter with all of the default settings. And then some of the parameter settings you will need to manually set and they're mandatory, but some of them you can just leave them as default and everything will just work. So there's some more. Oh, here's an example of I'm taking this standard pitch parameter, but then I've put it into its own function because I'm overriding a lot more of the settings on this parameter rather than just setting this flag. I'm overriding some of these strings. Well, it looks like that's all I'm doing, and I'm adding it to this group. This is another custom parameter. So when you see these UUIDs, that's because it basically means it's a parameter that's completely unique to this plugin. So carrier waveform, actually, maybe that should be a standard parameter concept, but I guess I decided at some point that it should just be unique to this synth plugin. The waveform is like it's a value that goes from 0 to 1, and it will like morph between sine, triangle, pulse, and sawtooth. I think it goes in that order. So that's another custom parameter, and then another one, and then modulator pitch. Yeah, I have the carrier pitch and the modulator pitch, which I'm seeing now. I've put a bug because I'm using the same parameter ID for both of these. So let's fix that right now, actually. That's obviously a copy-paste error that I've introduced during this refactor. So block generators synths, this is the old code, so I can see what it actually should be. So because they have these two, there's these two oscillators fighting against each other in this synth, because it's like doing a cross modulation synthesis. So there's two oscillators and they both have their own pitch parameter. So the carrier pitch, that makes sense, is the standard UID, and this is the UID it should be for the modulator oscillator. So let's put that in now. There we go, fixed a bug while we were talking about it. Yeah, and the rest of this is pretty simple. This is, implementing the C interface. And most of this is just calling into this C++ library, which deals with everything for you. And then I have a file here which just declares some data structures. And then this is the DSP for the test synth. It's pretty simple actually. And then this bit has changed where I'm taking all of the parameter data that the host is passing in, and I'm just formatting it in a particular way so that the DSP can make use of it in a somewhat effective way, and it can like figure out what the value of each parameter is at each point in the block. Yeah, I was going to go into some more technical details, but I won't. But anyway, this is how, again, it's just 3 files, which is quite satisfying. This is plugin.cpp, which is like the C interface model, which is just some data structures, and then DSP is the DSP. Sampler has this draw function file as well, which is because the sampler plugins are responsible for a lot of the legwork when it comes to drawing waveforms for the sampler blocks, because the host doesn't know anything about what the parameters mean. For example, this pitch parameter, for example, when you change it, it's changing the way the waveform looks. But the host system, I keep banging on about this. I keep repeating myself from the last video, but the blockhead does not understand what this pitch parameter is. It doesn't know anything about it. The only thing that knows about this pitch parameter is the plugin. So the plugin has to give the host a bunch of information about what it means when this pitch parameter changes and how it should affect the waveform. So there's actually a flag in the interface, which is one of the parameter flags would be moves display, which just means so that the pitch parameter by default has this moves display flag set, because it's a parameter which, when it changes, the host will query the plugin for like a visual update on the waveform. Anyway, okay, I've been talking for 24 minutes. Jesus. So the other thing I was going to talk about, that's all the plugin stuff. The host stuff is very work in progress at the moment, but I'm getting there. So previously the way things worked was the host has a bunch of data about different kinds of parameters. Params. And this data structure is it's not specifically about blink parameters, it's generic. So Theoretically, it could in the future it could be it has this could handle like VST parameters, for example, or generic parameters that you can set you control using MIDI or something like that. At the moment, the only kind of parameter that I have is blink parameters. So previously, what was happening was the host would scan for plugins, and then it would get information about all of these blink plugin parameters, and it would just directly store all of this information in this data structure. Now what happens is I have this like two-phase system where when the host scans the plugins, the blink, I have this data structure which is specifically about the blink params. So when I scan for plugins, I just store all the information about the blink parameters in here. And then once I've finished scanning the blink plugins, and I have all this information about the various parameters, then I will aggregate all of that parameter information into its final form. So I'll have so I have like phase 1, which is scanning the plugins, and then a phase 2, which is like looking at this data structure and generating the information that I had before. Yeah, and then there's this data structure hangs around for just querying the blink parameters for if I need to. So I have this like two phases to the plugin scanning now, and two data structures. One for like blink specific parameter information, and then the generic parameter information which I had before. So this is a much cleaner sort of architecture than that I had before, and it's more extensible, to use a very hand-wavy programmer term. So yeah, this is basically what I'm working on at the moment, and it's all going fine. There's no big problems other than getting bitten by an insect. So that's my update. I'm just getting on with it, really. What else? Is there anything else? I'm sure there's other things that I was going to say, but whatever, that's the end of the video.